survived being held at gunpoint 4 times in my life when I left Venezuela at 18 years old. Little did I know that my journey was gonna take me from studying nutrition in Spain to studying software engineering in Manchester. This is the story of how I chose software engineering as a career at 26 years old. In Venezuela, I was always passionate about tech, mainly because everything comes from the United States, so you end up being really influenced by what happens in the world through the United States. You think the US is probably the best country in the world because realistically it's the closest best country that Venezuela has, and a lot of the things that come to Venezuela come from the States, so they're all in English. And that's how I learned to speak English on my own when I was just a kid. I mainly learned English by listening to music, playing video games, and watching movies with a lot of subtitles. It's essentially like if I have a massive translator in my head, and that's why I make so many grammatical mistakes when I'm talking and when I'm also writing. And even though I really relate to the culture, it was very clear for me when I was a kid that I wanted to learn how to. Suddenly, this got much more blurry when I got to my teenage years and I became passionate about fitness, which is why I decided to study nutrition. But due to the situation in Venezuela, it's just very clear that it wasn't going to happen. So that's why when I was 18, I decided to leave the country and I went to study nutrition in Spain. I was robbed 1 time in Venezuela. I was pointed at a gun 2 times more by people that just wanted to go through the barricade, and I was pointed at a gun 1 last time by 1 military police. There was another time that I'm not counting, is that 1 time I also participated in a house shooting, and my house literally had like 4 or 5 bullet holes of a bunch of people that just came to the street and started shooting at the houses. Which is clearly why I decided that I needed to leave the country. Now, of course, when I left Venezuela, I was much more relaxed and I realized that I was at least not going to get killed in Spain. But some other concerns, mainly first world concerns, started to appear in my life. How was I gonna get a job? How am I gonna put food on the table? Where I'm going to live? What's gonna happen with me? In my head, I thought that Spain was going to be amazing, and it ended up being completely the opposite. I thought that since it was the only developed country that spoke Spanish, it was going to be very similar to a Spanish-speaking version of the States, and it was not like that at all. I think I was just quite naive because of my age. When I arrived to Spain, my main goal was to pass the university entrance exam so that I could study nutrition in Spain. It was horrible. It was so hard. The first serious job that I got in Spain, it required me to take 1 hour and a half of commuting on the train, plus 20 minutes on the bike, then having to work for 6-7 hours, and then having to come back on those 2 hours again of commuting. So it was essentially a 10-12 hours work day every day, not including the amount of time that I had to spend actually studying for the exam. Luckily, everything went well after plenty of Monsters and Burger King meals, and I got into nutrition. But when I got into nutrition, I realized that it wasn't what I was expecting to. If you speak only English, you're not going to relate to this so much. But the problem with English, or at least the benefit of English, is that the whole world runs in English. So if you're going to study something that is not happening in English, you're probably going to study years behind what is actually happening in the industry. And that's what happened when I studied nutrition. Everything was years away from what I was supposed to be studying. I was still studying things like the cholesterol gets really bad if you eat too many eggs, you can't have too many carbs at certain times of the day, the calories is not all that matters, so on and so on. And again, this is not a nutrition channel, so I'm not gonna go deep into that. But I knew that I was seeing things that they were not accurate. So I have to face a decision. Was I going to commit to this and just say the things that they wanted me to say in order for me to graduate and just get that paper? Or was I actually going to stay a bit more with my integrity and just not give them pleasure to? And I also realized that something that I dislike about that lack of communication or lack of reality that the nutrition degree had in Spanish within comparison to what was happening in English is that everything in those type of fields, like very medical fields, it moves really slow, especially in nutrition where studies tend to happen every so on. It's not so often that you can actually get a bunch of humans and follow a different protocol and see what happens, at least so rigorously. They're very expensive to actually make happen. And in tech, everything happens so fast. Like a year in tech, you have no idea how many things you can lose. There's a bunch of new frameworks coming up, there's a bunch of new tools coming up, there's new versions of those tools that you have to keep updated. So if you update the software that those tools are being used, you might get into problems because you're not updated with those things. And honestly, it can be quite a lot of things to be updated with, but it's so much more exciting than when I had to study nutrition. And I know that it sounds super arrogant, but I kind of knew everything already. I may not know how those things happen and why those things happen, but I knew what calories were, I knew what proteins were, I knew what carbs were. All of those things I knew how to actually, they worked out when you actually have to eat them on your day-to-day life. So there wasn't too much for me to discover. And when I made that decision, that's when I also decided to leave Spain. So I dropped out my second year of studying nutrition in Spain and I went to Germany because I was dedicating myself to coffee at the time, and I took it quite seriously. I took an SCA professional certification, which is around €1,000, so it's not a cheap course to pay. And while I was dedicating myself to coffee, that's when the COVID happened. And I realized that during COVID was when I truly understood what I wanted to do with my life and why that dream died when I was a kid of learning how to code. When that happened, I poured all my life and soul into actually studying coding on my own because I had a lot of free time, and my best friend was living here in Manchester, so I decided to come and live here. And I wasn't super keen on coming back to the university because it was a big financial commitment for me. But I finally decided, after I took a look at some curriculums and how the university life was here. So I decided to take the plunge, and honestly, it was the best decision that I've made in my life. I initially entered to AI and data science, but I had to do a foundation year because I come from Latin America, and it's mandatory if you come from Latin America that you have to do that here in the UK. So I did that, and then I did my first year of AI and data science, and in all honesty it was quite easy, but at least it got me in the mood of starting out in tech, learning how to code, doing those things on my own, pushing me into some sort of structure where I also had some friends that they were doing the same. And during the first semester of that first year, after it finished, we had a hackathon, and we actually won best proof of concept with the idea that we had, which is one of the projects that I want to do a video about it on this channel. And one of the judges that was on that hackathon was the head of the department of software engineering at our university, and he recommended us after he spoke with us and he kind of guided us on how to keep building this project outside of the hackathon. He recommended to us that we should switch to software engineering, and that's when it really clicked me. So I spent pretty much this whole summer from the first to the second year doing coding projects on my own, trying to get better at learning technologies, doing all of these things just for the sake of doing it. And you have no idea how much fun I had. I realized that it's one of those activities that I can just spend days and days and days without actually having to put too much effort into, I really have to do the thing before the day ends. I just get excited about it because it's not so much the coding itself, it's also about the problem solving. For me, coding is just a tool that I can employ when I want to solve a problem for myself. And luckily, the majority of the ideas that I have, they tend to be software solvable, if that makes sense. It's very unlikely that I also want to actually build something with my hands. I do have some certain cravings of doing those things, but I usually, I'm useless at that, so I'm like, yeah, I'm not doing this. I honestly don't know what's going to happen in the future for me. I really want to finish the degree and have something on my own, whether that is because I'm building really interesting software, because I have products that people are buying, or because I have this YouTube channel that I'm planning to grow in the next 2 years. But I do know that I want to do something on my own because I just don't want to depend on someone else, and I want to show to the world that you can follow your passion no matter at what age you're starting, and how much effort you put in is going to be the only thing that is going to tilt the scale for you to do something better with your life, and that it's never too late to choose to fight for your dream. I had to absolutely struggle from 18 years old to 23 until I decided to go back and study something that I wanted. I had to go through 3 different countries to live. It's been really hard, but finally now is when I feel that I understand what my life is going to be about. It's never too late to keep going. You just have to keep trying things, keep focusing on learning new skills, and I promise you that it's going to get better. See you on the next video. Bye bye.